Good evening, everyone. My name is Tadina Simpson, class of 2005, and I have the honor of serving as co-chair of Duke Black Alumni alongside Sanders Adu, class of 94. On behalf of Duke Black Alumni, welcome back to our Black in 2020 lecture series. It is always DBA's pleasure to facilitate relevant conversations concerning the Black community and to bring those conversations forward to the entire Duke alumni body. Tonight, we will explore one of the most critical topics that will impact all Americans and particularly Black America, and that is the election of 2020. Regardless of your political preferences, I'm fairly confident that we are all on this call because we all recognize the importance of voting and understand that it is not only our civic responsibility to exercise our vote, but it is also a privilege which for some, namely for Black America and women in America, were not always there. And while Black America today is free to vote, some of the plights of the past have resurfaced, making this election year such a significant one for us. Some of the obvious concerns being the national unrest around the proclamation that Black Lives Matter, the disparity in healthcare highlighted by the coronavirus pandemic, and the wealth disparity, to name a few. Tonight's speakers will candidly speak to some of those issues, but will also go deeper and uncover some of the obstacles and concerns for this election not commonly addressed, but that they are privy to given their key roles in government policy and politics. As we discuss tonight's topic, I am certain that there will be a lot of questions. Please feel free to submit your questions throughout the lecture by using the Q&A function on the Zoom platform. Those questions will then be moderated at the end of the program by my co-chair, Sanders Adu. With that said, and without further ado, I will now turn it over to Sanders to introduce our accomplished panel of speakers for tonight.
Well, good evening, everyone. Again, this is Sanders Adu, class 94, DBA co-chair with Tadina. It gives me great pleasure to introduce this distinguished panel of Duke Black alumni operating at the highest levels of government, politics, and policy in America. I've had the pleasure of knowing them all for many years, and I'm truly excited for them to share their unique and rich experiences with the broader Duke alumni family. And with that, let me introduce the panel. First up, we have Angela Alsobrooks, class 93. She is the county executive for Prince George's County, Maryland, which is Maryland's second largest county by population, over 1 million residents, and is also the wealthiest majority Black county in the entire United States. Next up, we have Michael Bennett, class of 77. Michael has many titles, but he is currently the chairman of the District of Columbia Board of Elections. He was also previously an Obama nominee for the Postal Commission Board. Next up, we have Paul Braithwaite. Good evening, Paul. Law school class 96 and Sanford School class 93. He is currently the CEO of his own lobbying firm, Federal Street Strategies, and the former executive director of the Congressional Black Caucus. In fact, Paul is the longest serving executive director in history of Congressional Black Caucus under 3 separate chairmen, Congresswoman Eddie Bernice Johnson, Congressman Mel Watt, and the late, great Elijah Cummings. Welcome, Paul. Next up, we have Joyce Brayboy, class 85. She is a managing director for government affairs at Goldman Sachs and a former chief of staff to Congressman Mel Watt, who is actually my old boss as well. Welcome, Joyce. Next, we have Mo Cowan, class of 91. He's a president and global government relations head at General Electric. And he also has the distinction of being a former United States Senator from Massachusetts, one of only 10 Black Americans to be senators in the United States. And last but not least, we have my classmate, class 94, Tremaine Wright. She is an state assemblywoman from Brooklyn, New York, and she currently serves as chair of the Black, Puerto Rican, Hispanic, and Asian Caucus in the New York State Assembly. Welcome, Tremaine. Now it's my great pleasure to introduce my co-chair, Harry Jones, co-chair-elect Harry Jones, class of 08, who will introduce our esteemed moderator. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sanders.
Blayne Alexander is an Atlanta-based correspondent for NBC News and MSNBC, where she reports for all platforms, including NBC News, NBC Nightly News, The Today Show, and MSNBC. During her time with the network, she has been at the forefront of some of the biggest stories in recent memory, including the COVID-19 pandemic, protest around racial injustice, and the death of Congressman John Lewis. Blayne previously spent 2 years as a Washington correspondent for the NBC News Channel, where she covered the White House, Washington politics, and the historic Trump-Kim summit in Singapore for NBC affiliate stations nationwide. Before joining the NBC News Channel, Blayne spent 6 years as a reporter and anchor with Atlanta's NBC affiliate, 11 Alive News. A four-time Emmy Award nominee, Blayne traveled the world to cover major events, including the 2016 Olympics, unrest in Ferguson and Baltimore, and the 50th anniversary of Bloody Sunday in Selma, Alabama. Blayne began her reporting career at WRDW-TV in Augusta, Georgia. Her work has been honored by the Atlanta and National Associations of Black Journalists. In 2016, Blayne received the annual Rising Star Award for the Atlanta Press Club. In 2015, Blayne and her husband, James Bailey, founded the Phoenix Leadership Foundation in Atlanta, an Atlanta-based nonprofit providing positive role models and exposure for young people in struggling communities. Born and raised in Oklahoma City, Blayne is a graduate of the 2008 Duke class and a proud member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, initiated through the Lambda Omega chapter of Duke and the National Associations of Black Journalists. It's now my pleasure to turn over to my classmate, Blayne Alexander. Thanks, Blayne.
Harry, you are the best. Thank you so much. I didn't know you were going to read all of that, so I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And definitely one of the highlights on all of that is being a graduate of Duke. So there's no place that I'd rather spend a Thursday evening talking to all of you, but really talking with so many of you. I think the beauty of Duke and what we are as a community is that we just have so much expertise across a wide range of subjects. So it's really special to be able to bring some of you guys together at what really is just a pivotal moment in our country's history, in our nation's history, when we are just a couple of weeks rather away from the 2020 election. So just to kind of set the scene for you guys and set the tone for how we want to get into this conversation tonight, I want this to be a free-flowing conversation, and I want to leave plenty of time for questions, because as this conversation kind of evolved, one of the first things that we talked about was touching on the idea of what's at stake, specifically what's at stake for Black America when we go into this election. And as we started talking about it as a group and putting together the panel, I think that regardless of your political affiliation, where you fall on the political spectrum, I think that we can all agree that this is definitely a pivotal election. And I don't think that we need to spend a lot of time on why this is so pivotal. You know, we're in the middle of a pandemic. We're in the middle of this national reckoning over race, Supreme Court seat up for grabs, all of these different things that are kind of cascading into this election. So I don't think that we need to spend time on why this is so pivotal. What we want to do tonight is really lean into the expertise that we have here on this panel and kind of go a step deeper, as we like to do as Dukies typically anyway, right? We want to go a step deeper and give you guys just kind of a deeper perspective, looking ahead to the election, leaning on the expertise of our panelists that you may not get in your typical conversation, just kind of going beneath the surface level. And then the second thing that we want to do tonight is we want to give you guys some tangible tools to take away with you. One, as you plan your vote on November 3rd, as you plan your own vote, but two, as you look for ways to possibly get involved in the days leading up to the election, as you look for ways to possibly volunteer and help others plan their vote as well. So we want to give you kind of an actual toolkit and some knowledge that you can take with you as we go into these final 30 or so days until the election. So that said, we're going to leave plenty of time for questioning, but the first thing that I want to do is jump into some of the issues of the election with our panel. And so this question is open to all of you guys, and I want to ask, from the conversations that you're having, from the perspectives that you have in your various arenas in the public space, what issues, what concerns, what potential obstacles are you seeing with this upcoming election, either that people need to watch out for? What concerns you the most as we go into November 3rd? And Tremaine, I'll start with you and your position from what you're seeing there in the New York State Assembly. I think you need to unmute. There we go. I think you're still muted.
Okay, there we go. I was gonna say, I am definitely clicking unmute. So, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for bringing us together to talk about this. I think right now we're in a moment where people just do not trust the system. They don't believe that their vote matters or that it's even going to be counted. Unfortunately, here in New York, I'm in New York State. I'm in Brooklyn, New York, and unfortunately, we've just come out of a primary in June where it took us over 4 weeks to count the absentee votes. Our Board of Elections just sent out 100,000 absentee ballots for the general election, at least a quarter of which were misaddressed or sent to the wrong people. And now we have to resend it. And we all know that we disqualified at least half of the, no, I shouldn't say half, a third of the absentee ballots that were returned in June's primary election. So there's great distrust. So I think right now in New York City in particular, but throughout New York State, we've got to find a way to make sure that we're informing people of what the processes are and how they can vote and how we can ensure that their votes are going to be counted. We've also faced the problem here in New York State where our boards of elections did not intend to begin counting absentees until November 14th, which is the same day that the Electoral College gathers so that they can begin to ascertain who has the most votes and who will be our next president, and confirming who will be our next president. I think those are the things that are in the conversation points here on the ground in New York State.
You talked about absentee ballots. That's something I'm going to come back to in a little bit, but I want to bring some of you guys into the conversation. Michael, I want to bring you in as the head of DC Board of Elections. I think messaging is such an important point in all of this as well, right? And so there certainly has been back and forth on, you talked about distrust, Tremaine. Michael, talk to me about the importance of messaging. One, how are you getting the message out there? Two, I guess, what is the necessary message to put out when there is so much distrust? And how do you get it out in a reliable way that people can actually trust?
Well, one of the things I think, and thank you, and wow, I didn't realize they were having those kind of issues in New York. But one of the things that I think is really important is to be as, for election officials to be as transparent as possible with regard to how things are done and what they're doing. In DC, what we've done is we've given people a number of different options in terms of how to vote. We have, the city council changed the statute to require that we send a ballot to every registered voter, which I was very happy about. And so we had planned to do it anyway, but I'm glad they changed the statute. And so we have sent ballots to every single registered voter. Now, the reality is every voter registration system has got some bad data in it. And so you are going to have a percentage of the ballots that are going to persons that, or that, will just have bad data, bad address, or they're not there. But we're very fortunate. It seems like that we've got a fairly good database, and we've messaged to people, one, to make sure that they update their voter registration system as well. The other thing is you want to message to people is for them to vote early. And one of the things that we have done is we are opening up vote centers where it doesn't matter where you live, you can vote in one of the vote centers, 32 across the city, that will open on October 27th. As everybody knows, not only DC, but everybody, Maryland, Virginia, everybody, Georgia, they had lots of lines, primaries. And the only way really to make sure that you have fewer lines is to get people voting early, and to vote by mail as much as possible. We also are allowing people to, like when they receive their ballot in the mail and they want to vote, and they also have an interest in voting in person, they can literally mark their ballot that they receive in the mail, put it in an envelope, and bring it to a vote center, and we'll take it there. We also are putting drop boxes in 55 locations around the city. So I think the big thing is to make sure you give people lots of options, but also be transparent. I mean, this is not a perfect process. As I'm sure Angela would tell you, she's been fighting and dealing with this COVID pandemic on the front lines more than anybody, at least in the DMV. And this is just new times, and there are a lot of new processes that everybody's working through to try and make sure things happen most effectively. But at the end of the day, you have to be transparent, and you have to give people lots of options.
And you mentioned, Angela, I want to bring you into the conversation too, as the county executive of Prince George's County. Answer that question for me, kind of the standing question of, from where you sit, what are the concerns that you have looking ahead to this election? And then I'll ask you as well, one of the issues kind of that we've seen just in reporting through the elections is what COVID is doing to really kind of upset this process. So for instance, there are so many different counties, different states across the country that are dealing with a shortage of poll workers, because poll workers tend to be the elderly population, right, over age 65, of course, the most at risk for COVID. So they're choosing to sit this one out. And so some places are having to close their precincts. And so that's kind of having a ripple effect. So how do you combat that? How do you fight that in a place that's as big as Prince George's County? And what other issues and concerns are you seeing there?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you, Blayne, so much, and to tell you how very proud we are of you. I want to say also to Duke Nation, hello, and to our fearless leader, Sanders, thank you so much for having me here. I'll just say a couple of things. First of all, the distrust that Tremaine talked about is well-founded, and that's the saddest part of this entire season that we are in, is that for years we imagined that it was the case that people wanted to disenfranchise us. We also imagined in many ways that we were in a situation where people wanted to likewise confuse us. And I think this is absolutely the case. And you know what, and we don't have to wonder whether or not this is the case, because the President of the United States said that the United States Postal Service was an area that he intended to attack, because he was concerned that if we were able to vote by mail, that somehow he would lose. He made that abundantly clear, and that really confirmed for so many people what they imagined for years and years, was that there was an effort underway to disenfranchise and confuse and to frighten people from voting. And so what have we done about it? There are a few things that had to happen. One is that we just had to make it safe for people to be able to vote using drop boxes, to go ahead of time. In Prince George's County, for example, we have 42 of these drop boxes around the county where individuals can go and drop off their ballot ahead of Election Day. And we also have made it so that you can, on Election Day, go in person. We have centers throughout the county, 41 voting centers, similar to what Michael described, where if you prefer to vote in person, you can go to those 41 sites around the county and vote. But the thing that we are asking people to do is not to wait. I think the most dangerous thing is that people, honestly, I think voting ahead of time, voting early and voting safely will be really important. Making sure that you utilize early voting, making sure that you, again, on Election Day, if you choose to go, that you really make a plan to make sure that you can get to that voting place. And when you talk about the pandemic, and are asking kind of what the effect of the pandemic has been, what have we seen? It's, again, everything we imagined would happen. The pandemic, I think, in many ways served as a microscope. It showed us everything we knew already existed in Black America. The disparity in terms of health access, the disparity in educational access, so many disparities. And I think it's been all laid bare now, but this pandemic has also affected voting. As you mentioned, 3,500 volunteers is what it requires for us to conduct an in-person election. And in Maryland, we had a governor who was so tone deaf that he came out and said very plainly, I want an in-person election. To some extent, I don't care what the cost. And to bring these seniors, 62% of our election volunteers are seniors. It's unconscionable to go into voting places for us to conduct this in-person election, but that's what he did. And the other thing was, unlike DC, which had the good sense to once again mail the ballot into homes, Maryland's governor, I don't know what the explanation could be, refused to mail ballots to voters as we did in the primary election, but instead decided that he would make confusing to many of the voters. And so these are some of the things that we're seeing. We want people to be very vigilant and to make sure that they vote early, requesting that ballot right away. And the other thing is we have to educate the people we know about how to vote. Don't assume that the people closest to you know what to do to return their ballot. We got to call relatives. Blayne, can you hear me?
I can hear you. It's a little, so you're getting a little garbled, but I can hear you. I'm making out what you're saying. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's all I'm saying is just make sure, I think the advice I have is to make sure that all of us don't take for granted that the people closest to you know how to access the vote.
So you gave me a perfect segue into what I wanted to get into next, Angela, which is I kind of actually want to touch back on what Tremaine had to say, and I'll move on from the conversation, take it to the next step in just a second. But the issue of the problems with the absentee ballots, that so many of them had to be thrown out simply because people weren't filling them out correctly. This is kind of a blanket question to all of you guys. Are there resources, either that you're offering or resources that you know of that, you know, let's say that I'm 75, I have not filled out an absentee ballot before. Where do you go for help? Can you go online to see, you know, make sure that you check this box, this box, this box? Are there volunteers possibly that are coming into people's homes? What resources are there aside from, you know, people just saying, hey, let me go help my neighbor, to make sure that these things are done correctly?
I'm going to jump in here. We have a number of voting advocates throughout New York City and New York State that have been doing an education campaign, trying to really identify what the three components are that you must complete in order to submit a valid absentee ballot. However, going door to door, talking to our neighbors, and having a face-to-face conversation tends to be the best, most effective way to get this done properly. However, we know that that can't happen in every case. We're also trying to encourage people to utilize early voting. It's very difficult to communicate with people when they have to read directions and work on their own independently without context or contact with anyone else. It's just very difficult. So we don't want to have people relying on their own knowledge base and submitting ballots that might be challenged. We really want to make sure that we have everyone's vote counted on election day. And similar to Maryland, you can walk an absentee ballot to any polling site and drop it off. You can have a conversation with the poll worker and say, oh, did I complete all parts here? And they can tell you yes, no, maybe so, and help get you to a completed valid ballot.
Does anybody else want to jump in on that? And if not, Paul, I'll bring you into the conversation because when we talk about the issue of trust and the question of trust, that was something that all three of you guys brought up, is that there are so many people right now who are distrustful of what's going on. So Paul, I'm bringing you in because you worked for members of Congress during the last Republican president, President George W. Bush. And of course, you were there during all of the contentious back and forth over the results of the 2000 election, and also a time where there was concern and questions over how ballots were filled out. That's when everybody started talking about chads, and that became a normal part of our lexicon. So I want to ask you, what lessons did you learn from going through that experience, from all of the questions and concerns and unrest over that decision, to almost kind of inform us here when it comes to trusting the process? What lessons did you learn from that?
Well, that's a great question, Blayne, and thank you. Thanks for asking. I mean, what I took away from that was, look, I actually worked in Florida volunteering in the 2000 election, and I remember flying out of West Palm Beach the next morning and there not being an outcome in an election, in a presidential election, and that was the first time ever. I mean, it used to be that you could, count on getting all the results from all 50 states. The West Coast would come in late, but you knew the outcome. And I just remember having this surreal feeling like, why don't we know who our president is? And why did we call it for one guy at one moment and then another guy? But I remember the outcome from Florida, and I still remember the number. It was only 537 votes that separated Al Gore and George W. Bush. And what I took away, and what I still take away, is every vote counts. Every person voting counts. And I remember the Black Caucus members literally starting an effort that they titled "Make Every Vote Count." It led to legislation being passed that's still talked about to today. The Election Assistance Commission was set up to help states and localities with the latest technology and the voting machines, and to alleviate the problem. You talked about hanging chads. Now we have situations. I saw something about ovals, and are the ovals big enough, or are they too close? And if you color it in, as you said, if you talk about a senior or even a non-senior, and your pencil, we remember when we were in school and we had to take standardized tests, it's the same kind of concept. And if there's a ballot design flaw, it becomes a problem. But, look, education and public awareness is going to be your greatest anecdote for what happens on November the 3rd. And now between now and November 3rd, nonprofit organizations, corporations, we were able to build a coalition of folks who got behind that legislation. So whether you supported George Bush or Al Gore, you cared about, having a legit outcome that everyone could walk away and say, you know what, everyone got to vote. It was that close. That person won. I think in this scenario, we don't want a situation where this goes to a court for one judge or 12 judges on an appellate or 9 judges on the Supreme Court deciding what really should be an election of 330 million Americans. So the lesson is we've got to make sure that when people are exercising that franchise, their votes get to be counted. We don't stop the counting. And we make sure it's fair. And I think that's something that both Democrats and Republicans should be able to agree on, for this year's election.
Paul, you bring up a really interesting point just about what it looks like on election night. And I think that for so many of us, we've kind of gotten used to that. When we go to bed, you see, hopefully when you're watching the news, hopefully it's NBC News, you look up and you kind of see the graphic that says, the next president is, or there are going to be young children in the White House, or what it is before you go to sleep. And just internally in our network at NBC, we are having conversations now about what election night is going to look like, because of the sheer record number of mail-in ballots, it's going to look different. And it is very likely that we are not going to have that kind of closure and finality at the end of election night. That's something that a lot of us are talking about when it comes to coverage, and what does that look like, and how does it look like, and how does it play out in the days to come. I want to get to solutions quickly, but Mo, I want to bring you in on the conversation too, when we just kind of lay out all of these concerns as we look ahead to November 3rd. You hold the distinction of having been a sitting U.S. senator. So you're certainly involved in circles and conversations that most of us are never part of. So when it comes to the conversations that you had with your former colleagues, and you just kind of talk about your concerns around the elections, I know that you've said that there are questions and concerns around polling, and specifically what that looks like as we're trying to, read the tea leaves and see who's voted where and what states are up where. Interesting, yes, for political, wonkies like myself, or people who are very interested, but it can also have some implications on who turns out to vote. Kind of break that down for me, those concerns.
Sure, thanks, Blayne. Happy to be here. What an august collection of talent, and thanks for the question, the opportunity. So let me answer your question with first an admission that I am a polling skeptic, and that's with all due respect to those in the industry. Polling is both an art and a science, and I respect it, but I am a skeptic nonetheless, driven by the fact that, I'm 51 years old, so I've been of voting age for 33 years. I've actually never participated in a poll. No one's actually ever asked what I might think about any election. State, local, doesn't matter. And I actually think for this election, because of the incumbent, the president, and the way that he is perceived popularly, I am convinced, based on conversations I've had with former colleagues, with people in the industry that I'm in now, and with just folks on the street, that I think the support for the president is being undercounted, because people are unwilling to publicly say, certainly to a pollster, even though it's anonymous, even more so to their friends, colleagues, neighbors, that they're willing to vote for the incumbent for re-election. They can justify it by they're a single issue voter. They can articulate what that issue is. But I think the president's general unpopularity beyond his base is causing a lot of people who might otherwise vote for him when they pull the curtain to not publicly say today that they're willing to vote for him. So I think the support for the incumbent is greatly underrepresented, which also, so the corollary of that is, I think the spread that's talked about in terms of the national polls that favor the Vice President Biden, are overestimated. I'm convinced this is an incredibly close race, which I know we grow weary of that and we lived it too many times over our lifetimes, but I think we see that again. To the last question, I don't think we're gonna know who's gonna be the winner of this presidential election on November 3rd. We may not know it on November 10th or the 17th, right? It's gonna take a while because mail-in ballots and otherwise. And, you know, and I agree with Paul. I'd rather not think that this election is gonna come down to the judiciary, but if I were a betting man, I suspect it might. And so I don't know that the polls are actually counting the electorate as honestly as the electorate may be feeling. If you are a poll watcher, I would pay close attention to the battleground states, right? The Michigans, the Wisconsin, the Ohio's, the Floridas, the Maines, right? That small subsection of states who seem to decide every presidential election we ever have, right? I live, for the benefit of the audience, I'm sitting in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts right now. Commonwealth of Massachusetts, all the electoral votes are going to go for Joe Biden. I can guarantee you that right now, all right? And so no one's going to spend any money here. No one's going to focus their energy on here. It's going to be focused on that handful of states out there. So if you're going to watch polling, pay attention to those states. Now, you may see things tightening up, but again, I would caution you to say, you know, trust your instincts. Polls don't necessarily tell you the truth always. And what I tell people are, if you really want to conduct a poll and really want to know what people think, start with your family and friends. Ask them, who are you enthusiastic about? Who are you going to support? And what concerns me, Blayne, is that there are a lot of Black voters or Black people of voting age who don't express enthusiasm, certainly about the Democratic, frankly, either of the nominees, but don't express enthusiasm about the civic responsibility of voting, right? And I think that's still a phenomenal problem we need to address. And if you're going to ask me, and people talk about enthusiasm, I think actually, ironically, President Trump owns almost all the enthusiasm in this race, both the enthusiasm for him by his base and the enthusiasm against him. And it's interesting because I think this is the first election in my memory where one candidate owns all the enthusiasm. And frankly, Joe Biden actually might win the White House just because so many people dislike the incumbent versus actually liking the Democratic candidate. And that is an interesting thing. And historically, that actually doesn't yield a victory, but it's conceivable this may be that instance where that actually happens.
I think that it's been very interesting when you kind of watch to your point, when you watch the conversations, when you watch the debate, as I'm sure many people did the other night. There's a lot of there is a lot of things centered on the incumbent, like you said, either saying that Joe Biden is going to be not very different from the incumbent or whatever it has to be, rather than kind of his own standalone platforms. But I want to bring up this issue of enthusiasm, because I do think that that's something that is kind of a constant, whether it's people who, actually, let me ask this. How strong do we believe that the undecided group is right now? I think that for those of us who follow the elections very closely, some people may find it hard to believe that there are some people who are still undecided. But for those of you who have these conversations, who look at polling, that type of stuff, how strong do we believe the undecided population is right now? If anybody wants to jump in.
I think it's, if you're asking how large is that population, actually, I'm going to now talk out the other side of my neck, as we say, right? But I actually do think it's probably true that most voters have made up their mind already. And I the percentage of undecided voters is relatively small, all things considered.
So let's talk about action very quickly. And Joyce, I want to bring you in on this because you have been involved in politics for more than 20 years, for 25 years or so, in a wide range of ways. So talk to people about how to get involved. I think that's the biggest question, because we've talked about, people volunteering possibly to be poll workers, to kind of take your cards, check your ID when you come in. We've talked about ways that you can volunteer to help make sure that people are filling out absentee ballots correctly. If people are watching this, if people say, hey, I want to get involved in some sort of way, what would you steer them? Where would you steer them as a first step?
So I think I wanted to really, well, first of all, again, thank you all for inviting me to join this very esteemed group of colleagues, friends, former classmates. And I just want to say that it's particularly impressive to have the women elected officials and to be able to be a part of that group. So that just really warms my heart. And so Angela, Tremaine, it's just so important and significant, the work that you all are doing. And it's very difficult work at a particularly difficult time. So you all are certainly to be applauded and commended. And I think I just wanted to follow up on what both of them already talked about. I think what's so important, but where so many people can actually volunteer right now, is to offer and volunteer for those people who are not able to go to the poll. It's everything that Tremaine walked through and said, if you're not able to you need help filling out your ballot. I think that's one of the most important things right now that those of us, our friends, our relatives and peers can do, is to figure out who can you offer to be helpful to, and make sure that I will come and help you make sure you fill out your ballot and make sure that it's properly delivered, because that's where the trust factor comes in. I also think that I've been hearing a lot recently where younger people are able to actually go to the polls and participate in voter protection programs. And I think that's so important, because one of the most important things that all of us want to do and need to continue to do is and it goes to the enthusiasm factor, is that we need to get more younger people involved to understand how important it is to vote, and to also get them involved in actually, understanding the process. So I think the sooner that they can be educated, and I'm very concerned, though, since it's not going to be such a traditional election in terms of going to the polls and all, how do we find that balance? But I do think for those who feel comfortable enough and are willing to do that, then we really need to just have as many people go and start, volunteering in their own precincts and neighborhoods, and be actual poll workers or voter protection, I think. So I think there's a lot, and I know we are providing a voter toolkit of how you can participate, but I think it's super important that we educate as many young people as possible to get involved, so they can see firsthand what their activity, their involvement, what a difference it will actually make and the impact it can have.
Absolutely. Absolutely. To that point, Michael, I want to bring you back into the conversation. You're actually running an election right now. You're the one who's in charge of it there in DC. So I'll just ask you straight, what do you need? What resources do you need? What volunteers do you need? With people, if you've got an army of, let's say 100 people who say, hey, I want to help, what do you need people to do? Unmute, yeah.
Well, we are incredibly fortunate. We have, since the national call went out for poll worker volunteers and a local call, and we're also very fortunate. I think Angela's in PG County, they're partnering with the Washington football team. We're partnering with the Washington football team, the Monumental Sports, which is the Wizards and the Mystics, and also the Nationals. And we've had athletes, Bradley Beal and I made an appeal for poll workers. And we are incredibly fortunate. We need probably 3,000 plus poll workers. We have trained over 3,000, and we probably have another 3,000 applications to go through. The mayor has given us a couple thousand city workers to work polls. We have, the process for counting mail ballots is very different than people going in to a poll and casting a ballot. As simple as it may seem, just opening the envelopes and, you know, trying to get through the process takes a lot more time than people walking to a poll and casting a ballot. The other thing that's really interesting that has happened in DC, and I think it's happening across the country, at least from what I've been hearing, is the demographic of the poll workers are changing. I walk through with my mask on, I walk through the training areas a lot at our offices where we are training people 6 feet apart and social distance and hand washing and everything. And I don't think I've seen many people that are 50 and over, certainly not in my age bracket. And I think the demographic is 25 to 45. We're going to set up a process where it takes 120 people to process this system we have just for opening ballots, checking signatures, and putting them into the tabulated account. The processes are very different, as I think everybody talked about, I guess particularly Andrew talked about earlier. And so but we still need people who we have absolutely no idea. One of the things I learned during June is you have no idea what's going to happen when it actually comes time, what we're calling election week instead of election day. We want people to come and start voting on October 27th. So you don't know what's going to happen. In DC, we had and all over the country, you know, social justice marches, and we had two nights where there were curfews in DC, and we during early voting, and so so you never know. So we are planning on training at least 1,000, maybe 1,500 people more than we need. I'm expecting record-shattering turnout all over the country. I'm expecting DC to be 3 times what is normal, which means it doesn't matter where you vote. It doesn't matter when you vote. You're going to be in a line. And so one of the things that's that I've found anyway is that people generally don't mind being in a line if they know that that's what's going to happen when they get there. And everybody's focused on voting. So we are going to use the Capital One Arena, National Stadium. In fact, if you vote at National Stadium, you'll be able to see the World Championship, the World Series trophy when you go there. But we're going to use that. We're going to use the Mystics Arena east of the river, and we'll be able to process large numbers of people at one time. So it's a tremendous challenge. And you know, we are asking the voters and everybody else to be as patient as possible as we get through the new system, trying to make sure that we're safe and that everybody has an opportunity to cast a ballot. That's a long answer to your short question. Sorry.
I think it's a good question. I think it's a thorough question, because I think that one of the biggest things when we kind of talked about just expectations around this election, 1, expectations on election night, but 2, expectations for voters. This isn't the one of the ways that the pandemic has really turned this upside down is this is not the year where you just get up on election day and just go and cast a ballot without having given any sort of thought beforehand as to what your day is going to look like. If you're going to go, here to wait, right?
Yeah, and I was asked by one of your NBC colleagues. I did an interview earlier today, and they asked, so are you going to release results on once the polls close on November 3rd? And the answer is, I don't know. I'm not sure what we're going to have. During the primary, we had over 80% of the persons that voted by a mail ballot, and so then we're going to start counting. Start processing mail ballots as soon as we get them. So I expect to have as long as people get things in early, I expect to have, quite a bit already counted. But I'm not sure what November 3rd after 8 o'clock is going to look like. And so I generally like to release results as early as possible. That, because everybody wants to know. So I'm not sure what it's going to look like, but I can tell you, you will not have final results on that evening. It's going to take several days because I think the country's going to vote in large measure by mail ballot.
Yeah. Paul, I saw that were you going to jump in?
Well, I mean, I actually think the numbers are going to be off the charts in terms of total participation, and I think that's a good thing. And I think, the fact that folks are talking now about November 3rd just being election day and that results will come, I think I saw a poll earlier this week and, hat tip to Mo, but 2/3 of the people said they did not expect to get a result on election night. And I think that's, a good thing because they're not going to get a result on election night. It'll just be, a segment there too. But, I just hearkening back to what we learned at Duke and the work we did while we were there and the classes we took. I mean, the level of impact that, whether you're a county executive like Angela is, or a senator like Mo is, or Michael chairing the Elections Commission. I mean, all of these levels, we think about president, but governors and members of Congress and mayors and all the way down. I mean, we talk about it in school, but it really does matter who are in these positions. I mean, when we thought back to Florida, who would have thought the Secretary of State, who again may be the arbiter of what happens in these individual states, emerges as the person who's either going to start the counting, stop the counting, and the like. And so, I guess I would just raise a point again of voting for everything. Don't just go in and vote for the top, the top of the ticket and walk out the door. Look all the way down, do the research, and we got a lot of smart people, I'm sure, on the call and on the Zoom, but it is so critically important because those people at the different levels have such an impact on our day-to-day lives, whether it's election stuff or otherwise. And I just wanted to just highlight that again.
I appreciate that. And Paul, kudos to you for bringing it back to Duke. I think that Sanders and Harry will certainly be glad with that. I've got a Duke question as well. Angela, I'll bring you in. I saw you unmuted. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say something, and I hope we haven't missed this point. I want to say, just get excited. I don't know about others who are listening on this call, but I think some truly amazing things are happening, not only in this election cycle, but in this season that we shouldn't lose track of. Someone said a moment ago, I think it was Michael, who talked about the demographic changing in terms of volunteers who are showing up to act as election judges, and talking about the age group, a traditionally older group. And now we're seeing younger people who are taking the responsibility of coming in and volunteering to work for Election Day. I think that's exciting. And so I think that in spite of everything that we're seeing, we cannot lose sight of the fact that this is a moment that we've been waiting for in so many respects. And with all of its difficulty, that we have issues that people are paying attention to daily. That we now in Prince George's, for example, we saw the highest voter turnout that we have seen since the 2008 election during our June 2nd primary. And we're expecting that on November 3rd, we're going to see even greater than that. And so people are re-engaged in a way that we didn't think was possible since the election of President Barack Obama. And I think going forward, we're not only going to see increased engagement, but to the point that was raised a moment ago about every part of the ballot, that we now know that it's not just the president that's important, but people have been hearing this word about the district attorney and state's attorney and what happens to the Senate races. And so I think we ought to be so excited. I don't know about you all, but I feel blessed to be alive. I mean, we want to live during a time like this. This is one for the record books. These are civics lessons that my daughter at 15, there's no way she could ever read enough to understand all that she's seeing on a daily basis. She's learning now truly what this country is about. She's engaging in a way that I think was not possible before. And so these are difficult and trying times. Some of it, even what we've seen, we're talking about, the concerns we have about Election Day, but what a wonderful, I think this is just in many ways a wonderful time to participate really in the history of this country. And I'm expecting great things to happen because we're all awake now. I think we were a little asleep at the wheel in 2016. We won't be asleep this time. So as one of my friends here says, Lottie Dottie and everybody, I promise you will show up on November 3rd to make sure that they are accounted for. And that may take us, Paul, I was in Florida also in 2000 for that election and had all of the wind taken out of my chest when the court determined the election. But you know what? This is just a great time, and I don't want us to lose sight of the power of the moment that we're living in.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that perspective. I appreciate that energy. So thank you. Thank you for bringing that in. I do think that's an important moment. And really why we're having this discussion, why we're having so many talks around what is happening right now in our country. I want to, and Joyce, I want to bring you in for this question real quick. And then Sanders, I know that we've got several dozen questions that are now in the queue. So thank you everybody for being engaged. We want to get to as many questions as possible, but kind of along the lines of what Angela said, just turning back to our panel very quickly. You all have reached the pinnacle of accomplishments in whatever field, certainly in the public arena. And I think that I always love kind of giving the inspirational piece of just kind of hearing a little bit about what you would say to those who are still climbing, or those who would want to take the next step when it comes to being in the political arena or whatever it is. So especially those, who may still be Duke students right now. So Joyce, I just want to bring you in, and what advice would you have for anybody who wants to succeed in this field and who may be looking to you for just how you've leveraged your Duke experience, but what you've learned along the way that could help somebody else?
Well, thank you for that question. I do agree with everything that Angela said, and she stole some of what I wanted to really reflect back on in terms of how important it is, aside from just my own career, but I think one of the most important things that we should be doing is being informed by actually understanding everybody who is actually on the ballot. So when people ask about how they can actually get engaged, I just, if I don't remember to say this now, then I might not be able to make the point. But one of the things I always tell people, you need to know who's running for local office, who's running for school board, who's running for all of these different levels, because we get so caught up in a presidential year and we only focus on, the hype of who's running for president and then at the federal level and all. But I do think it's so important. And the other point that I wanted to make around having these amazing women that we've witnessed who have had the courage to run for office is that this is exactly how you should think about. The sooner you understand the process and how important your vote is that's what we want you to know and understand, so that you will feel like you can actually run for office. You can be Kamala Harris and be the first Black vice presidential nominee and the first woman vice presidential nominee. And so I just think that it's so important that we set these examples for young people. I think for me, I'm a behind the scenes person. I always have been. I kind of I don't actually want to say how long ago it was. And I know I have a few of my peers, which I won't call out by name, that have been texting me during this Zoom. But back when we were in undergrad, one of the first campaigns I volunteered on was Jim Hunt versus Jesse Helms. And I think that, being right there in Durham and in North Carolina, particularly as a North Carolinian, it was just thrilling to be able to be involved and think, oh, this man that we've heard so many negative things about, unfortunately, throughout our lives, that we can actually go out and do something about it. And I do love the reference and the tie back to Duke, because, just watching what's happening in North Carolina right now, it's a fascinating time. We have at least, I can't even, there's so many African-American women who are running for Congress there. There's so many women. We have Chief Justice Sherry Beasley, who's on the ballot there. I mean, it's just such an important time. And so to Angela's point, as much as it's doom and gloom in many aspects of our life, it is such a thrilling time to be involved in politics and to, and to feel like, especially if you haven't been a public policy major, working in Washington on Capitol Hill, I just feel like there is really no greater opportunity or the ability to just have the exposure that we had. I know that Paul, Sanders, and I, in particular, just felt like it was just one of the most tremendous learning experiences. And so for me, I tell people, if you have the opportunity, it doesn't have to be in DC. You can work in wherever your local member of Congress is, or your senator, or your state assemblyman. You should get involved and get to know them now during a campaign season, whether or not you work for them on the official side or not. And so this is the time to do it. And this is what, for those alumni who have, I got a couple of messages that said, oh, I didn't know you were Duke alum, but my son or daughter is there now. I think this is the most important thing that we can be doing, is to encourage everyone to just be informed by knowing who's on the ballot and go out and find a place to, play a role now. So that's what I really wanted to say. I'm not sure I completely answered the question, but I feel like that's the most important message that I can pass along at this time.
You got it in there. Thank you so much. No, I think that was crucial to get in there too. I'm going to bring Sanders in to bring in some of our questions, because we have a lot and I want to get through as many as possible. So Sanders, come on with a few questions.
Sure, thank you. And thanks again to this esteemed panel and wonderful moderators. So the chat was on fire, guys. Really great questions. First question, really for anyone in the panel, but we're living in a period now of disinformation, particularly on social media, where you have Russian disinformation, you have President Trump spewing disinformation. Particularly for elected officials, how are you combating particularly social media disinformation? Maybe for Joyce or Paul, do you think Congress should be passing laws, restricting this disinformation, whether it's on Facebook or other platforms?
I'm gonna let, I'll answer the second question, and then the elected officials. I mean, look, Congress is in an unenviable position of trying to regulate a space that is just very difficult to get your arms around. When you think about Facebook having approaching, I think, 3 billion users every month on the platform, and anyone can put anything up. As quick as they yank something down, someone else has gone to some part of the space and put it back up. And I, the First Amendment is cherished in our country. And once you start restricting, what goes on there and playing with that, it's just very, very difficult. Is a short answer, Sanders. I mean, it's just difficult for Congress to get their arms around it. But, we need our elected officials to say and tell people the truth, quite frankly. I mean, there is no reason to demagogue mail-in ballots when we know 5 states across this country have done mail-in ballots for 2 decades, almost approaching 2 decades now, and it's never been a problem. So now in a pandemic, when we don't want people together, it would seem like the perfect time to say, you know what, stay home so we can prevent and get our arms around this pandemic.
Others?
So I totally agree with what Paul just said. And this is one of those moments when we realize more than ever why leadership matters, and local leadership matters in particular. I know Blayne was asking a question a moment ago about what we say to the young people. And the point of the matter is we often talk about what rights we have, but we ought to talk about the responsibility that we have as well. And for those of us who are able, we truly do have the responsibility of leading in these spaces when we know that people are looking for the kind of leadership that is honest, that Paul talked about. We have to be in these spaces where we can protect and lead the people we love. And so, I'm just really at a time where I feel so blessed to have a chance to lead here in Prince George's, because it matters that you have integrity and that people can look to you in a moment like this one where there's so much mass confusion. They have to be able to trust what you say. And in this time where we've talked about alternative facts, and that people have become comfortable realizing that leaders lie to them, we have to be the ones who step forward, who tell the truth no matter what, who give people plain information and make good decisions. And so in the case here, I hope that people in my county, and I think that they do, trust what I say when I've told them, that they have to vote early. That's the reality of it. I know most people want to vote on election day. I understand it. I think my parents are those kinds of people. They want to show up, no matter what, they want to be there on election day. But the reality is it is safer in the middle of a pandemic for people to vote early if possible. That means to use the mail-in ballot. Here, 96% of our voters voted by mail in the June 2nd primary election. It means that they should also utilize these drop boxes that we put around here, and I know they're in other places as well, to try to vote early if possible, and to remind them that most of all, in African American communities in particular, COVID is not over. So I don't care what else they are telling us. It is unsafe for many of us to gather in these voting spaces. And for those who absolutely want to vote in person, we're going to make that as safe as possible. But we have to be honest about the fact that COVID-19 is still present and spreading in our communities, and that it's had a disproportionate impact on our health and well-being. This is important. So those honest messages are necessary. They have to be told by us. They have to hear it from us. And so two things. We have to tell them the truth. And to Blayne's point, we have to be there in those leadership positions where possible, to lead and protect and to give good information and to guide people into the future.
Thank you. I want to switch gears a little bit here. We also got a question in the chat, and this is actually a really, really good news story, I think. But 20 NBA teams have opened their arenas, led by the Atlanta Hawks. Our very own Grant Hill led that effort to open their arenas as polling sites. What do you think? Corporate America. I know Mo and Joyce and I all work for large companies. What do you think corporate America or other parts of this country should be doing to make sure that we are having safe space to vote? Kind of on Angela's point about still being COVID. Who else should step up besides our NBA owners?
Yeah, I'll just jump in. I mean, we've had the Washington football team step in. I think they've been talking to Angela about doing something for PG County. They're doing commercials for DC. I think Maryland as well. The Wizards and Mystics and Capitals have offered their arenas. We actually got a call in Nationals too. Like, we actually got a call from the CEO of Under Armour. They have, and I think they're in doing some things in Baltimore. But they've offered to assign employees to volunteer to do various things for us. They're going to give volunteers days off if they are volunteering to work the polls. It doesn't matter whether it's DC or Maryland. We actually got $120,000 of free money from Facebook to message around voting and how to vote and how to process. I mean, so lots of corporations are stepping up. I think part of the thing that we have to do is to let them know what it is that they can do. And because this is just all is just so different. We'll stop talking and let the others jump in. But I could not say all the things that we're getting from the sports world and from the corporate world.
Sanders, I would, just to pick up where Mike left it, I would say there truly is a movement this election cycle that I haven't seen previously from the corporate sector. There are a number of companies, and forgive me, I can't recall the name of the organization, that have aligned around the notion of giving their employees either paid time off or some relief for election day to vote, to volunteer. But if you really want to give credit where credit's due, it's less to the corporate entity, it's to the employees in those organizations who are demanding that their organizations exhibit greater civic responsibility. And similarly, we saw it in the wake of this summer, in the wake of the George Floyd murder and the Breonna Taylor murder and others, where employees are calling on the institutions to take a greater sense of responsibility to the broader community and the civic responsibilities. And I think that's manifesting itself also when it comes to this upcoming election. And so you're seeing more and more companies, and it runs the gamut from giving folks days off to sending internal messages, encouraging people to vote or to volunteer, as the case may be. And look, frankly, respectfully, that's overdue, right? I mean, it's important that we have our institutions, private, public, or otherwise, encourage everybody to be civically responsible. And a big part of our civic responsibility is being active in this electoral process, showing up to vote, volunteering if you can, and if you're an employer, affording varying degrees of flexibility to your workforce so that they can be civic participants in this process.
Thank you, Mo. Switching gears a little bit, I want to kind of attack the elephant in the room here. So obviously we just had a debate 2 days ago, and of all the things that happened in the debate, one of the things that has still gotten traction is President Trump's comment to his, some white supremacist supporters to stand back and stand by? This was a question in the chat, and I guess the implication there is, there could be potentially, hundreds or thousands of people because of that request going to the polls, whether it's early voting or election day, potentially intimidating voters. What do we, as a Black community and just caring citizens, do to combat that real potential of voter intimidation on election day? It's for anyone on the panel.
I'd love to hear from the former DA for Prince George's County on what the rules say here. But I will say this, and I did not know him until last evening. There's a gentleman by the name of Aaron Ford, who's the Attorney General of Nevada, and I saw him on an interview last evening, and he was just impressive. And he said, listen, I want to make it crystal clear. It is illegal. You will be prosecuted if you intimidate or threaten people at the poll. He said, that's number one. He said, number two, if you vote by mail and then you show up to try to vote at the polling station on November 3rd, that's illegal too, and you'll be prosecuted for that as well. So he said, so I want to be the person to let people know what they should do. I know you have someone else telling you, go to the polls and watch. He says there's a formal process for doing that. You want to follow that formal process? Great. But you show up with flags and weapons and the like, he says, we will prosecute you in Nevada under our state law. And that's the other thing I think folks should really realize is that, we're a country of 50 different states of 50 different laws. I imagine that the vast majority of them have laws on the books that say you cannot intimidate someone at the polling station. But again, I will yield the floor or the screen to the former DA.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, Paul, for that. I tell you, so this is what I can tell you as the county executive. Now, I can tell you as the DA that I agree with the statement that individuals who participate in that kind of conduct ought to be prosecuted and should be prosecuted and will be held accountable here. But I can tell you that this really is a concern that so many of us share about the potential for intimidation or violence on election day, sadly. And I can tell you that I have been in conversations as early as yesterday or as recent as yesterday with other elected officials around the state of Maryland, other county executives, and we have decided that together we would develop a strategy, a security strategy around election day activities to make sure that we're prepared to respond should any of that occur. So this is a very sad moment. That we have to prepare for that, but I can tell you that very quietly, and I know that Maryland is situated different than many other places, we are definitely preparing for that, and I will be working with county executives from across the state of Maryland who will be putting together a strategy, public safety strategy to make sure we are prepared should some violence break out around Election Day.
I want to follow up on that real quick.
Please.
Too, because that was going to be my question is how much is that part of your election day strategy now for Michael and Angela? And I guess when we talk about messaging and all of this, how do you get the message out about that? For those who may have heard that or who may be wondering, how do you get the message out to say, hey, we're watching for this, we're not going to stand for this, either to deter that sort of activity or intimidation as it may be, or to let voters know, hey, this is going to be a safe space and we've got your safety in mind? How do you get that messaging out?
Well, one of the things I can tell you is that we decided in our group of county executives who speak each week that we didn't think it was a good idea necessarily to publicize it. One of the things we were concerned about is encouraging that sort of behavior, and instead thought that it would be safer to very quietly plan the strategy to put those measures in place. And the thing we talk about in terms of safety and security is I have assured our voters that their ballot, the integrity of the ballot, we have 24-hour security around the drop boxes. I'm sure Michael will speak to this as well. But those areas now that we're encouraging people to go prior to election day to vote, those drop boxes do have 24-hour security around the drop boxes. But in terms of just having a strategy in place for election day, we thought it would be wise not to publicize that and encourage individuals who wanted to make some sort of public statement and wanted to take advantage of the attention. So we thought it would be wise not to advertise it ahead of time. Michael, I don't know what you all are seeing there in DC about that.
Yeah, I told a reporter this morning that I'm kind of a nervous Nelly about some things, and that's one of the things that I'm a nervous Nelly about going forward. But we also are not advertising or talking about the things that we're doing. I am, we are looking at, and actually we actually have a security on the various locations and drop boxes, and we also are putting the boxes in places that are very lit and open, in front of libraries, in front of one's actually in front of a police station. So, so yeah, that is something, and we're going to be very strict in terms of enforcing the limitations of activities between the feet between the polling location and where people are able to gather and have other activities other than polling.
I want to bring Joyce into this question briefly. I know Joyce, you're from Charlotte and from the South, and I know your mom and generation have been civic leaders. What are folks, stalwarts of communities, particularly in the South, saying about kind of the vote? Also, we just lost John Lewis a few months ago, and his whole life was dedicated to voting. What are people in Charlotte, and particularly your mother's generation, kind of saying about just determination to vote in this environment?
Well, honestly, I mean, that's a great question. I think that when it comes to, it's back to the whole logistics and process of, will they actually be able to vote in person, or will they actually have to cast their votes via mail-in ballots? And that's all, again, a part of the education process. I mean, fortunately, North Carolina has had an early voting process. They seem to be very well organized on the ground, from what I understand, to make sure that the ballots go out and have gone out, and that in the regular process of where you would have people knocking on doors and encouraging people to go to the poll, they're actually making sure, have you requested your ballot, and make sure when you get your ballot, again, if you need assistance to deliver the ballot, to return it to the polls, if you don't trust sending it in through the postal service. So I think that, they're as committed and focused as ever. I think, honestly, just as they never thought they would see Barack Obama be president, they surely never thought that they would witness what we're going through, and the disgraceful debate that we saw the other night. I think that's certainly top of mind. But again, when you have so many people, I'm super proud. I keep echoing this, but I'm super proud of Mayor Vi Lyles, who's the mayor of Charlotte there. And I think we have a number of very accomplished elected officials, Black elected officials throughout North Carolina, who are going to make sure that anybody and everybody, regardless of their age and all, will be able to go and vote. So I don't think you'll see any less commitment, regardless of their physical ability to make it to the polls. I think they're more focused and determined than ever that their vote will continue to, their voice will continue to be heard, and their vote will continue to be counted.
Thank you, Joyce. I've got one final question before I turn it back to Blayne. Obviously, we're all Dukies on this phone, on this call, and a question came in the chat. What should Duke and similar situated universities be doing, particularly to educate students around the importance of voting and civic engagement? And what do you think Duke should be doing in a leadership role around voting and civic engagement?
Well, I'm going to jump in here and say one of the things that was very helpful to me was that I actually was able to get a summer internship to work in what I'm going to refer to as just public interest. And so when we provide opportunities for students, I think that that's usually the entryway in. It gives them some eyes. It, just like someone else identified earlier, working on someone's campaign tells you whether or not you want to work for them later on. Let's give them some more opportunities and make sure that they are actually working in the public interest. It doesn't have to be in someone's political office, but we definitely want to make sure that we are encouraging internships and helping people to explore those opportunities earlier and more frequently.
Thanks, Tremaine. Blayne, back to you.
Sanders, make a point on that as well. I mean,
Oh, sure.
I love the fact that the Alumni Association put this on, but I would love to see our law school, our public policy school, our business school also have forums like this. Invite a former senator down, invite a county executive to address the current student body. I mean, I remember when I was there, you know, I don't remember an African-American leader on campus, you know, at a very prominent level. I think Reverend Jackson was probably at that time the most prominent, you know, political figure. He had run in 84 and 88. But today, the number of African-American leaders across our country, Joyce mentioned the fact there are 4 African-American women who are running in North Carolina statewide right now who are on the ballot at the Chief Justice level, at the Labor Commissioner level, and both candidates for Lieutenant Governor are African-American women. Across the South, you know, in Mississippi, Jamie Harrison in South Carolina, Mike Espy in Mississippi, there's an African-American woman who's a Democratic nominee in Tennessee. You know, these are all prominent voices. Whether they win or lose, I think students would benefit from hearing their story, their journey through this pandemic, running statewide, challenges, opportunities, and the like. And that helps, I think, young people when you're in school just to see what's even possible. You know, Mr. Cummings, who was my mentor, always used to talk about exposure and exposing people to things. I mean, he used to say, if you can't see it, you can't be it. And it was like, you know, he was rhyming, but it was so very true that if you cannot see where you could be, he talked about when his dad saw him when he got sworn in for Congress. It was the first time he ever saw his dad cry. And he says, "Dad, why are you crying?" He said, "Because now I know what I could have been had I had the opportunity." And for lots of young kids, I don't want them to have that opportunity taken away from them because they don't get the exposure. And so, you know, to the extent that we can raise our voices and the Alumni Association can find opportunities for folks like Michael and Mo and Angela and Tremaine and Joyce and others to be a part of that conversation and rope Blayne back into moderating, I think it would be worthwhile.
I absolutely love it, and I'm happy to do it anytime. So let me, to kind of wrap up this conversation, this has been a very rich conversation, and I want to thank all of you guys for just bringing your A game like you do every day, but really for bringing so much thought to this discussion. So a couple of things I want to say. When we started at the beginning of this, we said we wanted to give you a toolkit, and we've mentioned that throughout this. So in the resources that'll come as you registered for this, you're going to see a couple of links, a number of different links. One is to NBC's Plan Your Vote platform, which NBC News and MSNBC have kind of put together to do just that, what we've talked about. You can't just get up on election day and say, hey, I'm going to go vote. But, you know, what are your deadlines? What are the rules? What are the, you know, where can you go vote? And you can go state by state and literally plan every step of your experience in casting your ballot. So that's a valuable resource there. And a number of other links that we've discussed there tonight. So make sure that you check the resources panel for that. And then the other thing that I'll say, and this is something, Paul, that we just kind of spoke to, is just really embracing the beauty that is Duke and kind of the richness that we have. So I always like to say that next to marrying my husband, I feel like choosing Duke was the best decision that I've ever made. And this panel really illustrates why, because we've got such a depth of talent right here. So I would just hope and push everyone here to use that, to actually do that. So, you know, you can reach out to the panelists. One, follow them, follow their work, follow them on social, follow what all of our incredible panelists are doing in their respective spaces and support that work. And then two, and I hope I'm not speaking out of turn for anybody, but engage, because I know that there are a lot of questions. I know that there are a lot of people that you may want to reach out to on a personal level. Absolutely do that. That's what this alumni network is about. That's what Duke is about. So definitely take advantage of that as well. So just to wrap it up very quickly, I'm just going to ask each of you to give some final thoughts, either looking ahead to November 3rd, or what words you would give to those, again, who may be looking and saying, hey, what advice do you have for someone aspiring to, you know, climb in the public arena? So Mo, I'll start with you. Let me just go around.
First of all, again, thanks. It's a tremendous honor to be on this panel and to have a conversation with you, Blayne. Watch you all the time on NBC, so respect. So love Duke. My political education, in some sense, really began at Duke on West Campus under that tree on the black bench. I don't know if the black bench is still there, but we all know what I'm talking about. And so I would encourage those who are interested in getting to public service, perhaps even government as a form of public service, start locally. In the context of Duke, I just say, look, do your homework, figure out who from Duke is into that arena, and do some outreach. Duke folks like to take care of Duke folks. I'd love to hear from you, love to get to know you. There have been 10 Duke alumni, I believe, who've ever served in the Senate. 2 of them are there still. 2 of us were interim appointees. One of those 2 is the co-chair of Joe Biden's campaign, Ted Kaufman. So Duke folks have a deep, deep reach. So don't be shy, reach out to us. And then as for November 3rd, and we talked about how do we get folks to get engaged and vote. I'm a grassroots guy. Start with your friends and family. Talk to them, tell them how important it is to just get out and vote, right? They may not vote for the person you want to vote, but we need black and brown folks actually to show up and vote and to make sure our voice is known. So start with your family, start with your friends, start in your church, start in your whatever social club. That's what I would say. Start there, start small, and then let it multiply.
Oh, Tremaine, I'll go to you next.
I think I just want to say ditto to everything that Mo just said. And I also want to piggyback a little bit on what Angela said. This is a moment of change in our communities. Everyone's challenged with something, and that means everybody's looking for a solution. So if you're willing to do the work, if you're willing to try, if you're willing to engage, this is a moment of opportunity. So don't miss it. So I think that reach out to people we know, explore every opportunity, and really embrace this moment of change.
Thank you so much, my soror. Michael, I'll go to you next for your final thoughts.
Okay, I just wanted to let people know there is, and I'm at one. This is certainly a pleasure. All the panelists are friends. There are lots of friends that are on the call that have texted me, and I appreciate all the support that everybody's given me. I'm an old corporate guy, never intended to be involved in politics at all. And I guess, and by the very nature of the job, as heading on the Board of Elections, I am nonpartisan. I couldn't make a political statement by law if I wanted to at this point, at least a partisan one. But so I really do encourage, I mean, it's been a very enriching experience for me. And I encourage people to take the opportunity and to offer up their services to be involved, particularly in the process, and support the process. I tell all of the persons that are in training classes I have a chance to speak with, voting is the tip of the spear of American democracy. There is absolutely nothing more important than voting. And to be able to be involved in that process and be at the tip of that spear is a joy and a privilege. And so I encourage all the other Dukies to consider offering their time and talents to the process. And I thank you all for the opportunity to be a part of this, and pray for us for the next over the next couple of months, and be patient. It is going to take a while to get all those mail-in ballots counted.
Michael, thank you so much, and thank you for everything you're doing there in DC. Paul, final thoughts.
Thanks, Blayne, and thanks again for Sanders and the team for pulling this all together. I'm gonna do a shout out because I got to go back and see her, to my wife, Sonia, who also was like the best thing I got from Duke University, and my mom, who told me that was where I should go to grad school. Look, I'm hopeful that the outcome on November 3rd will be one that we can all have confidence in. I think we have to use our voices and not be shy in this moment. And regardless of what you're doing in your day jobs, your civic duty here is to make sure that this democracy that we have can be passed on to the next generation. Much of what I'm doing now is from my 2 boys, Matthew and Jordan. And when I think about the fear sometimes that I have that they can't walk down their street and take their dog for a walk because of what may or may not happen, that's not a comforting feeling. And I didn't have that necessarily 6 years ago or 8 years ago, but that's got to change. And I know I'm not the only parent who feels that way. Sanders has twins. Angela has children. I mean, we have to build the America we want to live in. And it starts by having conversations like this, but then getting up tomorrow and having that conversation again and using our voices and the training that we got, the education that we got at Duke to try to make this world a better place. Also, I know that Dean Kelly's on the line from the Public Policy School, and I saw some of her comments. Thank you, Dean, for joining. And I thank the administrators at Duke for giving us this forum and this opportunity to engage with the alumni. It really is an honor to be a part of this. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Paul. Joyce, final thoughts?
Yes, I'd just like to say, if you've ever had any inclination or desire to run for office, please consider it. And we need as many smart Duke alum to be a part of that. And I just think that's so important. I would also say, know who your elected officials are at every level of government. I can't stress that enough. Get to know them. They will listen to you, especially if you continue to show up and make yourself known to them, whether you volunteer or not. Understand what they stand for, and express your opinion and share with them what you think they should be doing one way or the other. And then finally, obviously, as we've all been talking about tonight, go out and vote.
I think that is the strongest takeaway of all of this. Go out and vote. Joyce, thank you so much. And Angela, I will let you have the final word.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you, Blayne. And I want to thank DBA and all these wonderful panelists. This has been just so wonderful. But I want to thank Duke University. I really do. I have to tell you, I told my father when I was in 6th grade, you know, I think I'm going to go to Duke University. And he calls me little fella because he desperately wanted sons and got these 2 daughters. But he said, you know, little fella, if you work hard enough and get yourself there, your mother and I will do everything we can to help you. They didn't have a chance to go to college, but they sure made sure that I could get to Duke. And I have to tell you, it has truly been one of the single best decisions I've ever made. And it just keeps giving. And it has been my desire to give back all that was given to me. And it's just been amazing. I'll go back to what I said a moment ago about just not missing the miracle. This has been an amazing time for all of us to be alive, watching history unfold, including this election and everything that it represents for all of us. My great-grandmother, Maybelle James, would have loved to have seen a moment like this. She was born in 1897, lived until my first year in law school. And I can tell you, with as sharp as she was, she could have never seen all of this. So we are truly living during a blessed time, but the best is yet to come. And I guess the final thing I'd say to everyone relating to this election and everything we're seeing, don't stop after November 3rd. The momentum that we have developed, the care and concern that all of us share right now after COVID and everything we've experienced, please don't let it die on November 3rd. So whatever the result of the election, and I'm believing that we're going to be pleased on November 3rd with the result of the election, but we still have a lot of work to do. And let's make sure that we don't take our eyes off the prize and that we continue to be committed to educating our children and taking care of our elders and fighting for justice and fairness and all of the things that we've cared about for all of these years. November 3rd won't change that as our responsibility. But thank you again for having me, and to Duke Nation, you know, let's go get them. Let's make sure that everyone, as I said, Lottie Dottie and everybody has a chance to participate in our democracy.